The dress came on a Friday. Not to my apartment, not to my mother's house, where the guest list was already pinned to the refrigerator, beside a magnet shaped like the Eiffel Tower. Because my mother had never been to Paris and didn't see why that should stop her from dreaming. It came to my workspace on the 32nd floor of the Sutter Group building, delivered by a courier who rang up at 4:22 in the afternoon and handed me a long white garment box with bridal printed in gold script across the lid. I set it on the end of the drafting table and went back to the Harwick penthouse elevations. Then I went back to staring at the box. Then I gave up pretending. I'd ordered the dress from an independent designer out of Portland, ivory lace over crepe, fitted through the waist, subtle sweep train. The photographs had been gorgeous, but I hadn't tried it on yet. She'd taken my measurements over video call and promised her work fit exactly from measurements alone. I needed to believe her because my wedding was in 18 days. Fletcher Crane and I were getting married in 18 days. Fletcher was 38, a commercial real estate attorney, the kind of man my mother would have called sensible. Not unkind, not difficult, just present the way furniture is present. Solid, functional, not particularly interesting to be near. We'd met through my father's business associate 8 months ago. My father's firm, a mid-sized general contracting company he'd built from scratch over 30 years, had taken on a project that went sideways. Cost overruns, a materials supplier who'd defaulted, a bank loan coming due faster than the project could cash flow. Fletcher's family had connections to the bank's leadership board. Nothing was ever explicitly said. Nothing had to be. I'd understood the math the moment I watched my father's face across the dinner table when Fletcher's name first came up, and I'd said yes when Fletcher asked, because I was 32 years old and I'd told myself that practical was enough. I hadn't told anyone it wasn't. I pulled the lid off the box. The dress was more beautiful than the photographs had suggested. Something about seeing it in 3 dimensions, the way the lace overlaid the crepe with that barely there shimmer, made it feel real in a way I hadn't prepared for. I touched the fabric once, carefully, the way you touch something you're not sure you've earned. The executive washroom on 32 was around the corner. Full-length mirror, enough space. Mr. Sutter wouldn't be back. His standing Friday call with the Seattle office ran long without exception. His assistant Nolan was downstairs handling a vendor situation. The floor was empty. I told myself I was being practical. Better to know the fit now than the morning of. I took the box and went to try on my wedding dress. It fit. That was the thing. It fit beautifully, like the designer had somehow accounted for every dimension of a body she'd never actually seen. I stood in the long washroom with its warm lighting and marble countertops and looked at a woman in a wedding dress who looked almost nothing like me. Or maybe exactly like me, if I'd made a different set of choices. I stood there longer than I intended, long enough that I stopped seeing the dress and started seeing the question underneath it. The knock made me flinch hard enough to grab the counter. Scarlett. I knew his voice. 5 years of working beside someone means you know their voice the way you know a particular chord. Not just the sound, but the weight it carries. Cormac Sutter never raised his. He never needed to. My voice came out wrong. I thought you'd left. Seattle call got rescheduled. A pause. The courier logged a delivery to the floor. Nolan mentioned it. I stared at my reflection, at the dress, at myself in the dress. It's nothing, I said. Personal delivery. I'll be out in a minute. Silence, then, does it fit? The question was so quiet I almost missed it. What? The dress. Does it fit the way you were hoping? My throat did something complicated. Yes, it does. He didn't speak for a moment, long enough that I thought he'd walked away. Then, can I see? I should have said no. I knew exactly why I should have said no. I opened the door anyway. He stepped in slowly, the way you open something you're not entirely sure you should. Cormac Sutter was 6'2", dark-haired with silver coming in at the temples, and possessed of a controlled stillness that most powerful men try to perform, and he simply had. He was 46 years old. He had never once, in 5 years, treated me as anything other than exactly what I was. The best designer on his team, and the person he trusted most with the spaces that mattered to him. He stepped into the doorway and he looked at me. Something moved through his expression. Quick, almost invisible, the way a current moves under still water. Then his face went quiet in a way that felt different from his usual composure. Quieter, somehow, than I'd ever seen it. "Does it look good?" I asked, and I hated how much I needed the answer. "I know it's not from a salon or anything. I found the designer online and the measurements were taken over." "Don't marry him." The words landed the way something lands when it falls from a great height. All at once, with no warning, complete. I stared at him. "I'm sorry?" "Fletcher Crane," his jaw tightened. "Don't marry him." "Mr. Sutter." "Cormac." He said his own name like a correction, like the name I used mattered. "5 years and you've never called me by my first name. Use it now." My hands twisted in the skirt. "I don't think you understand the situation." "I understand it better than you know." He turned away, one hand going to the back of his neck. "Which is exactly why I'm saying this. You are about to marry a man you don't love because it's convenient for your family's finances, and I cannot." He stopped. "I shouldn't have said that. I apologize." He started for the door. "How do you know that's why I'm marrying him?" He stopped. "The situation with my father's firm, the bank connection, Fletcher's family." I kept my voice steady. "How do you know any of that?" He turned back slowly. His expression was not what I expected. It wasn't surprise. It was something older and tireder than surprise. "Because I know what happens in my industry in this city," he said. "Including when a contractor I've worked with for a decade gets into a cash flow situation that didn't need to become a crisis. Including when someone with the right connections starts circling that situation. Including what was offered and what was accepted." The washroom felt very small. "Then you understand why I said yes." "I understand why you believed you had to." His voice was rough at the edges. "That's not the same thing. It's my family, Cormac." His name felt different in my mouth than I expected. He went still when I said it. "Your father's problem is not your debt to pay," he said. "Easy to say from where you're standing." He absorbed that without flinching. "That's fair. I should change. There are other options, for the loan, for the firm. Options that don't require you to spend the rest of your life with a man you look at the way you look at a contract you've already signed and stopped reading." I went very still. "How long have you been watching me that closely?" I asked. Something passed through his face. He didn't answer. He just stepped back from the doorway and let me go. I changed back into my work clothes, packed up the Harwick plans, and rode 32 floors down, telling myself nothing had changed. I lied to myself for 5 days. On Wednesday, I was at my father's house for dinner, carrying dishes from the kitchen, when I noticed the framed document on the wall of his home office. I'd seen it 100 times. First National Bank. Loan satisfaction notice. I stopped and looked at the date. 11 months ago. Fletcher and I had gotten engaged 7 months ago. I stood in the doorway of my father's home office and looked at that date for a long time. I called in sick Thursday. I spent the morning pulling records that were technically available to me as senior designer, handling financial documentation for Sutter Group's construction partnerships. An anonymous grant disbursed 11 months ago through the Sutter Group Foundation, routed to a third-party construction support fund, which had in turn cleared an outstanding balance on a loan held by a particular mid-sized contracting firm. My father's debt had been paid off 4 months before Fletcher Crane ever asked me to dinner. I was in Cormac's office before I'd thought through what I was going to say. "You paid it." I set the documentation on his desk. He looked at it. He didn't look surprised. 4 months before any of this started, you'd already cleared it. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't know you'd accepted his proposal as a financial transaction." His voice was careful and quiet. "I thought you wanted to marry him. I thought I was managing my own feelings inappropriately, and that you'd found someone and were happy, and my job was to be glad for you." "Your own feelings." He met my eyes. "Yes." The office was so quiet I could hear the ventilation system hum. "How long?" I asked. A pause long enough that I counted it. "Since the Meridian Project," he said, 3 years ago. You stayed until midnight 3 nights in a row because the contractor had installed the wrong stone, and you refused to let the client see it until you had a fix. You were furious and precise and completely relentless, and I brought you coffee at 11:30 and you looked up and said, "This is fixable. I just need you to trust me for 12 more hours." And I thought. He stopped, exhaled. I thought I was in serious trouble. 3 years. He'd felt this for 3 years and kept his mouth shut. "You're my employer," I said. "Yes. There's a power imbalance that makes any." "I know what it is." His jaw was tight. "I know exactly why I said nothing. I'm not asking you to disregard it. I'm asking you not to marry someone you don't love, because a problem that doesn't exist anymore made you think you had no other choice." I drove to Fletcher's office that evening. His space was all glass and chrome, an expensive absence of personality. He rose when I was shown in, pleasant as always, and I sat across the desk and said, "I know about the loan." His face didn't change quite fast enough. "My father's debt was cleared 11 months ago," I said, "before we ever met, which means everything you implied. The helpful family connections, the sense that our families had something to offer each other, was built on a problem that didn't exist." Fletcher straightened his already straight cuffs. "Bank records can be complicated." "I've seen the documentation." A silence. "Whoever paid it," he said, "let your father keep believing it was outstanding. That's manipulation. You don't want to be associated with." "What I don't want," I said, "is to be associated with someone who let me believe I was helping my family when I was actually just being useful." "I chose you specifically." His tone went cool. "That should mean something." "Why specifically, Fletcher?" He looked at me for a moment. "You're intelligent, you're presentable, and you've had 5 years of access to the most valuable commercial property portfolio in this city. An attorney with political ambitions needs the right partner, someone who fits the image and understands the landscape." He paused. "That's not manipulation. That's strategy." "It's the same thing," I stood. "We're done." "The engagement contract has a termination clause," he said, and his voice went cold. "Breaking it on your side comes with liability. The ring, the venue deposit." "Send me the number." I set the ring on his desk. It clicked against the glass. "I'll take care of it." I walked out. My legs were steady. I was proud of that. I sat in the parking garage for 11 minutes before I trusted myself to drive. Cormac called that night. I didn't answer. I texted, "I ended it. I'm fine. I'll be in tomorrow." He replied, "Take the week if you need it. This isn't going anywhere." Then, a minute later, "Are you actually fine?" I thought about it. "Not yet," I sent back. "Getting there." I came in the next morning anyway. I needed the clean logic of a design problem, the way a space either works or it doesn't, and you can know which if you pay attention. I was at my desk when his office door opened. "You came in." "I always come in." I didn't look up. "Fletcher's attorney contacted me. The termination liability is $18,000. Venue deposit and the ring." "Scarlett." "I'm handling it. I have savings." "I'm promoting you." I looked up. He leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, watching me with an expression I'd spent 5 years learning to read, and had apparently been misreading for most of it. "Vice President of Design. You've been functioning at that level since year 3. I've been undertitling you, and the salary correction reflects what the work has actually been worth." He paused. "It will also cover the termination liability in approximately 6 weeks." "You can't just." "It's a correction, not a gift. You can argue about it, or you can take the title you earned and we move on." He crossed the floor and set something on the edge of my drafting table. A small box, dark blue. "This is separate from the promotion." I looked at it. I didn't touch it. 2 years ago," he said, "you mentioned your grandmother had a ring she'd always meant to leave you, and that it had been lost when she moved to assisted living. You described it once. Oval stone, Art Deco setting, yellow gold." His voice was level and careful. "I had our estate contacts look for it. It took 14 months. It had been sold at auction. I bought it back." My hand moved to the box before I decided to move it. Inside, oval green stone, Art Deco setting, warm gold. My grandmother's ring, which I had assumed was gone forever, sitting on a square of dark velvet like a piece of time someone had gone and retrieved. "Cormac, My voice had gone somewhere I couldn't reach it. I had about 12 different plans for the right moment, he said, and none of them involved you, having just broken an engagement and me standing here at 9 in the morning. I want to be very clear. I'm not proposing, I'm not using this as leverage. The ring is yours regardless of anything. It belonged to your family, it should come back to you. Then why now? He was quiet for a moment. Because I've been waiting for the right moment for 2 years, he said, and I've concluded that I've been using that as a reason to stay at a distance. And I don't want to stay at a distance anymore. He met my eyes. If you'll allow me not to. I set the box down, I stood. I had worked beside this man for 5 years. I knew the way he went still when he was concentrating on something that mattered. I knew he read actual books, and kept 3 going at once, and always had a bookmark. Never dog-eared, always a bookmark. I knew he remembered the names of everyone who worked for him. The building's cleaning crew, the overnight security staff, the people most employers never learned to see. I knew he was 14 years older than me, and had spent those 14 years building something real, and carrying the weight of it with a steadiness I had found, without meaning to, enormously grounding to be near. For 5 years I had filed that feeling under professional respect. I had been wrong about that. I'm going to need some time, I said. I know. I just got out of an engagement. I have things to process, fees to pay, plans to recalibrate. I know. No impatience in it, just that steadiness offered without condition. I'm keeping the VP title regardless, I said. Something warm moved through his expression. Wouldn't have it any other way. And I'm keeping the ring. It's yours. I picked up the box, turned it over once in my hands, looked at him. Okay, I said. Okay? Don't rush me, Sutter. The way he smiled then, not the controlled professional expression I'd catalogued over 5 years, but the real one, the version that reached his eyes and creased the corners and made him look exactly his age, in the best possible way. That was the first moment I understood what it meant to say, a person could change a room just by letting themselves be in it. He asked me to dinner 3 months later, off the clock, no agenda. A restaurant I'd mentioned once in passing almost 2 years earlier, that I'd assumed he'd never registered. He'd made a reservation. He remembered which table I'd said had the better view. We talked for 4 hours, not about the Sutter Group, not about projects or deadlines or clients. About the book currently on his desk, A History of American Architecture that I had, it turned out very strong opinions about. About the trip I'd taken to Portugal the year before that had been, more than I'd admitted to anyone, an attempt to outrun a feeling I didn't know how to name. About his sister's baby, and how he'd driven 3 hours to be there for the birth and cried in the parking garage afterward because he hadn't expected to feel that much. He told me that, quietly, over dessert, like it was information that belonged to me. Walking to my car, he stopped on the sidewalk and turned to face me. I'd like to do this again, he said, as many times as you'll let me. I think I can manage that, I said. He tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. The gesture was so deliberate, so careful, that I had to look away for a second. Thank you, he said, for coming to dinner. Thank you for remembering the restaurant. I remember everything about you, Scarlett. No strategy in it, no performance, just the plain fact of it, offered simply. I always have. I drove home with the windows down, even though October in Chicago is not window-down weather. I needed the air. I needed somewhere to put the feeling in my chest that had apparently been building for 3 years and had only just been given permission to exist. Fletcher's attorney sent the termination paperwork 2 weeks later. I paid all of it at once, from my own savings. Cormac didn't know until I told him months later, and the look on his face when I did was not what I expected. Not surprise. Something quieter, the look of a person whose long-held belief has just been confirmed. You didn't have to handle it that way, he said. I wanted to, I said. It needed to be mine to close. He nodded, didn't say another word about it. That was the thing about Cormac Sutter. The thing that had been true from the very beginning, and that I had, for 5 years, filed carefully into the wrong category, because I was afraid of what it meant if I didn't. He understood, not in the easy way. in the way that required paying genuine attention to who someone was and then adjusting accordingly, without being asked and without expecting recognition for it. He'd been doing that for years. I just refused to let it mean what it meant. We took it slowly, dinner once a week, then twice, phone calls that started about projects and ended somewhere else entirely. Small things, coffee on my desk when he arrived before me, a book left on my chair with a sticky note. Chapter 11 is going to frustrate you. I want to be there when you get to it. The Harwick client asked specifically that I present the final design. A first in 5 years of working on his projects, and I found out later that Cormac had told them I was the reason it worked, and they should hear it from her directly. Her, not our designer, not our team. Her. 8 months in, he cooked dinner at his house. Badly, by his own cheerful admission, though the pasta was actually fine. We sat at his kitchen table for 3 hours, and somewhere in the 3rd hour he looked at me in the middle of a sentence and stopped talking. "What?" I asked. "Nothing." He shook his head. "Go on." "Cormac." I was going to say something that might be too much. "Say it." A long pause. "I would very much like for you to be here," he said carefully. "Not just tonight, regularly, indefinitely." He turned his water glass in a slow circle. "I'm not saying it well." "You're saying it fine." "I'm asking whether." "Yes," I said. He looked up. "Yes," I said again. "Stop building up to it." The smile that crossed his face then was the best thing I'd ever seen. And I had seen quite a lot of beautiful things in 5 years of working on spaces designed to take your breath away. A year after that night, he proposed in the least dramatic setting imaginable. My office, 11 in the morning, while I was mid-argument with a contractor on speakerphone. He waited until I finished the call. He slid a small box across the drafting table without ceremony and said, "Whenever you're ready, no pressure. I just wanted you to have it." Inside, a cushion-cut diamond, simple platinum band, nothing excessive, elegant, chosen, I understood immediately, for exactly the person I actually was, not who someone needed me to be. "You could have done something more dramatic," I said. "I know how you feel about drama. I might have liked it just this once." Noted for next time. He was trying not to smile. "Is there a next time or?" I reached across the table and kissed him. He made a quiet, startled sound and kissed me back, his hand coming up to my face with the particular gentleness of someone who has been careful with something for a long time and is only now being allowed to stop. "Yes," I said when we broke apart. "For the record." "For the record," he repeated, and his voice did something low and warm that I intended to spend a very long time getting used to. I thought about the dress sometimes, in the months that followed. That white garment box on the end of the drafting table, the marble washroom and the warm light and the woman in the mirror I hadn't quite recognized. The way I'd asked, with more vulnerability than I'd intended, "Does it look good?" And the way he'd told me the truth. Not the polite version, the real one, the one that cost him something to say out loud. "Don't marry him." I'd thought at the time that it was about the dress, about the occasion, about Fletcher. I understood now that it had never been about any of those things. On a Saturday in June, in a small ceremony at a garden venue outside the city, I walked toward Cormac Sutter in a dress I had chosen freely, in a life I was choosing freely, and he looked at me with that same expression he'd had in the washroom doorway, 16 months before. Unguarded, unmanaged, the composure that had held for years coming down all at once because he didn't need it anymore. "Hi," I said when I reached him. "Hi," he said back, and his voice was rough in a way that told me everything about what the moment cost him, and what it meant to him, and how long he'd been waiting for it. We got married in the late afternoon light, surrounded by the people who mattered, while his sister cried openly, 3 rows back, and my mother somehow resisted the urge to mention that the centerpiece arrangements on the ceremony tables were slightly off-center. He held my hand through all of it. He never once let go.